Hello, I'm Caleb Woodbridge, and welcome to my very first Imaginative Discipleship live stream. This is a bit of a new departure. I was recently on another um, um, uh, on another live stream with someone else. I was like, oh, I should have a go at this. So I've got a couple of friends involved, and I'm looking forward to celebrating and discussing The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which has just turned 75 years since it was published in back in 1950. And it's definitely one of my all-time favorite children's books. It's really shaped my imagination, so I'm really excited and keen to discuss that. But there's also some things that can be said critically about it. I want this to be an open, thoughtful conversation, not just fanboying, although I'm sure I will do plenty of that, but also to take a thoughtful, critical perspective on it. So let's both celebrate and discuss both the highs and the questions it raises in terms of all sorts of things around faith and meaning and fairy tales and how stories can be bigger on the inside than the out, like the wardrobe to Narnia. So first of all, I'm going to start bringing on my guests. First up, I've got Jeff. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Caleb.
Would you like to introduce yourself? Just say a little bit about yourself, and also maybe jump to say when you first read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Yeah, I've got one of my copies of it here as well. So I'm Jeff. I live in Inverness in the Highlands of Scotland, and I'm a lifelong fan of C.S. Lewis. And I think I can't remember when I first read it, but certainly when I was very small. And I can't remember a time when I didn't know that story inside out. And also grew up watching the BBC adaptations of several of the books, and they being a huge part of my childhood. So I think I discovered Lewis through Narnia, and then I've gone on to really enjoy reading everything else he wrote as well.
Excellent. Yes. Yeah, it was certainly the first step into many other things. I've got plenty of his other books, his other fiction, science fiction, Till He Has Faces, and other stuff he wrote, as well as his apologetics and indeed his literary criticism. I even went on to study Lewis at university as part of my English literature studies, which was a wonderful stepping off point for diving into medieval literature as well. So it's really been significant for me.
Yeah. Well, similarly, I studied philosophy at university, and it was actually a really interesting example because having my own Christian faith then tested in that secular, very sort of rigorous academic environment. And it was often turning back to books like Mere Christianity and Miracles and The Problem of Pain, where I was going to find just an alternative kind of rigorous viewpoint that I sometimes brought up in my essays and things like that. So, yeah.
Yes, yeah. It was quite fun on some of the critical theory seminars that I had as a student, to sort of bring in a bit of C.S. Lewis as a completely different perspective on some of the things, like gender, for example. It's like, yes, but have you considered the medieval cosmological view which C.S. Lewis helpfully describes?
Exactly. Yeah.
I had some fun with that, slightly mischievously. I'll bring our other guest onto the stage. So welcome, Bernie. So,
hello, guys.
Bernie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a Pomiosi. I'm a bad boy, British, Australian, Dutch. I've had an interesting, varied life, and literature and the English language ironically enough, hasn't been my strong point. But now I've come to retirement and realizing that I want to communicate better, which is good for communicating with the wife, which is good for the relationship. And I want to write books and particularly write my autobiography for Caleb's mum, my sister. So I'll just declare my nepotism that I'm here because I feel like a academic hobbit because I've thrown myself into the world of books the last year, reading lots of books, going to book launches, literature festival, and all that, and writing class, and I'm seeing all these people with these super literature qualifications, whereas I feel I just scraped a university degree in accountancy and statistics, and then spent half my life in IT with an accounting thread, which I've had throughout the whole of my career, and then going into financial management, running my own little businesses and looking after trainees. Oh, yes, yeah. Well, when you get to this stage of life, it's harder to pin things down exactly. I can't even say for sure when I exactly read it. I'm assuming I did read it because up to secondary school, I was a prolific reader and read lots of things, so I read it. But certainly what I remember best is that we used to have discussions at an Anglican youth fellowship about the books, but especially about what order they should be read in, which I think I said in a comment when you posted something a few weeks ago. Yeah.
There's an easy right answer to that, which is publication order all the way. So
yeah, you said that before. Yeah.
Anyone who disagrees can
it's just wrong.
It's just be wrong.
And to bring it up to date, I've had a long interest and involvement in politics. Well, we're talking UK, so I was involved with the Liberal Democrats even up to 2010 when I'd come back to the UK for a couple of years and working in the MP's office. But I've continued to follow that interest, and I'm thinking about doing political commentary writing because I've been reading widely on that. And what shocked me is that the political commentators haven't realised, very few of them have realised that it's a big theme of the Conservative side of politics, the ratepayers and all that. They want to reduce the size of government. And that's what Trump's been going for. But very few political writers have acknowledged that. They don't seem to be fully in the game as far as I'm concerned. Okay, perhaps that's me being a bit snobby because I've been so long involved with politics and following it. Yeah.
That's a rabbit hole, I think, for another live stream.
That ties into Tolkien and Lewis with that. I've been very interested in the book I'm reading at the moment, Search for Middle-earth, tying it into the political and historical background. And in many ways, it's similar to today's what had been going on with appeasement and then armament and totalitarian, authoritarian persons appearing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Just briefly on that, because with Tolkien, as in one of his letters, he described himself as being politically anarchist in opinion, or absolute monarchy, which is an interesting contradiction. He wanted government to be either non-existent or as small as possible, and one person being about as small as you can get without having any. So he shares the distinction with I think it was Salvador Dali, who also called himself an anarcho-monarchist. So it's a bit of a minority sport, that political persuasion, but Tolkien and Dali having that curious connection.
Yes,
but yeah,
it's quite hard putting labels on yourself, because it's sort of, especially for my autobiography, I'm having to decide whether I've really changed or whether I'm still at heart liberal, democratic, radical of sorts, that I still want to destroy the two-party system, and I want to get rid of all political donations to take the money out of the politics to create true democracy. But that's my own ideas. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Well, or we could go with ancient prophecies and magic lions giving kingship to children who stumble into the land from another world. So I'm not sure it could work out any worse than any political system that we've got. So. So I'm keen to explore. So obviously 75 years on, I think this is still a beloved classic, certainly among Christians, I think, but probably more widely as well. It's still being read. I've read it to my been reading it to my 8-year-old. We just finished the series earlier this year, so that was a real precious thing for me, that having that opportunity to share these stories, to pass them on to another generation, and having had them read to me by my my mum, and so by Alison. She read them to me, and presumably read them or had them read to her when she was young. So I think there is that. Lots of people do have that experience of wanting to hand it on. Do they still connect today? And what is it that gives them their lasting resonance, do you think? That's perhaps where we can start off with some discussion.
Do you mean all the Narnia books, Caleb?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, because that's the one that's most read and remembered. But I think it was interesting earlier this year at the Hay on Wye Literature Festival. I helped out with an outreach there that Bethesda Church was doing, and they had a Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe Narnia theme because of the anniversary this year, and lots of people engaged with that. There were various things up. You could vote with a sticker for your favourite Narnia book, and you could also show how many you'd read, and most people had either read who voted either had read The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, or who'd read all of them, and not many people had sort of read anywhere in between. So I think it's interesting that people either read it and were like, okay, I enjoyed that, but perhaps it's not for me, or they went on and most of them would read the whole series. But yeah, certainly why lots of kids and families, lots of people having a fond memory, having opinions about it. It seems that it's still embedded in British culture. Certainly, still has a place there.
Yeah, I think it's that I'd especially like my grandchildren to be reading it, to help instill the Christian message and the Christian values. Because what, from my recent reading, as I was saying, The Search for Middle Earth, is that I already knew a little bit, but C.S. Lewis had made himself a presence during World War II with his talks, and soldiers in pubs would turn the radio up to listen to him talking. That after all the depression of the 1920s and people turning away from God and atheism, C.S. Lewis was turning them back to God. So by the time his book came out, C.S. Lewis was a known quantity, that his talks are being made into a book, Mere Christianity. And so, and yeah, the British nation seems to be looking again for Christian values. Whether we can make much of the now there being more Gen Z young guys going to church in the UK and all that, if that's a real turning to cultural values, or if it's just, well, Christian values, or whether it's just cultural values as in wanting to retain the traditional English Anglican, I'm Church of England culture. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because it seems that the Church of England isn't really benefiting from the quiet revival or the vibe shift or whatever you want to call it. I think the big beneficiaries seem to be the Catholic Church and the sort of Pentecostal Church from the data in the Bible Society report. So yeah, I think anecdotally, I'm hearing from a lot of Christians that they're having more people turning up. There does seem to be a bit of a change in attitude. There is a greater openness, and guys showing up with an interest in faith. In one case, someone was telling me that they started coming to their church up sort of up in the valleys, but now they're getting the train down to Cardiff to go to the Eastern Orthodox Church there. So there's been interesting interest in that more historical liturgical churches.
With the Anglican Church now looking pretty woke, I don't think these young guys will be more, like you say, they won't be wanting so much to go to the Anglican Church. They'll be wanting to go Orthodox or go Catholic or whatever.
Yeah,
they find it's more traditional because they're so fed up with these woke values. Yeah, sorry.
It's all right. As what you say, Caleb, about the sort of cultural element. I want to just on a slightly sort of maybe on the face of it more trivial level. I think the idea of Narnia is in the culture. I keep coming across it in places where, because my ears prick up, obviously, if someone says something related to this, like, oh, what's going on? And I've often heard it where people are talking about, oh, that's the Narnia cupboard. I've more than once heard that, where the idea is that it's a cupboard where there's a whole country in that cupboard. There's so much stuff in there. It's where we throw all the stuff that we need to get rid of in the office or whatever. And they don't necessarily, I think if you ask people, they wouldn't necessarily know why it's the Narnia cupboard. They wouldn't even necessarily know what Narnia is, other than the vague idea of there's a country in a wardrobe. And that sort of, but that's all Lewis. Like that kind of comes from the book. And so that's right in the culture that it's sort of become people who don't know the story know the concept. And there's not many stories that have that sort of effect. So that's really interesting. And so it shows the power of the idea of opening a cupboard door and discovering something far bigger. And of course, the TARDIS kind of is a, as a Doctor Who fan, there's obviously the huge kind of connection there of something that's as bigger on the inside as your blog's called.
I think part of the appeal of both Doctor Who and Narnia is that sense of it's enchanting the everyday with that sense of, oh, there could be magic just around the corner. That maybe if I open this wardrobe door, if I find just the right spot, then I can find some way myself into this other world, be risked off on these adventures, and that's massively appealing. And for me as a child, I wrote about this in my latest Substack. You can find that on biggerinside.co.uk. But it's writing about how I did look for Narnia, and I was conscious it was a story, but I was like, if I pray really hard, if I ask God really nicely, I mean, maybe, just maybe, he will use his creative power to bring this fictional world that's so amazing to life. And maybe in the new creation, something like that will be real. We'll be able to sort of subcreation will take on this whole new layer, and we'll sort of create our own worlds in that more literal sense. Until then, I don't think he's going to indulge us in that sort of way. But I mean, that's a big part of things like video games as well, is that sense of stepping into these worlds and stepping into an adventure and being able to have this whole life there. So yeah, I think there's something there that powerfully resonates. But is that just escapism? Tolkien wrote in defense of escapism, saying that it's only jailers who don't like it. But someone said that jailers don't mind escapism, it's escape that they don't like. So is there a sense in which do stories like Narnia help us to better engage with the world, or is it a kind of escapism in a negative sense of let's just amuse ourselves with these things? What do you think of that?
Well, with what I've been reading, both Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, in their couch ways, were helping kids deal with conflict and threats and war and all that. It's not a heavy message, but it's there. And that's it. So
I mean, even the fact that the story starts in the middle of the Second World War, the only reason the children are in the house where the wardrobe is because they're
evacuees.
Evacuees, that's the word, thank you. Coming out of London. So it's and I think there's a one thing I definitely learned from Narnia, which I think is very much not, in terms of it not being escapism in a bad way, is the fact that is looking at characters like Peter and realizing what nobility is in a true sense, and honor and valor and chivalry and values that you honestly just don't see those looking around our culture. So you have to get them from stories, and there's lots of stories around that have them. But a lot of the modern versions of those stories, I won't name any that I would perhaps point to, just in case I offend anybody. But they're sort of thin and empty, and the equivalent in all the Narnia stories. But you could point to particularly in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is that the children are learning, like you say, Bernie, like learning. Lewis's sort of message is partly that they're learning to cope with the difficulties of life in what was a really difficult time in history, but they're also just learning about what it means to be to live well. It's learning virtue, and part of that is to be noble and to be self-sacrificing, and I think I picked up on those values in a way that I just grew up with because of growing up with these stories, and then chatting to other people, they didn't grow up with those values, and in fact they mock those values sometimes because they've never seen them in anything other than a sort of ironic sense rather than a true sense of. So I guess like from the story, like the idea of Aslan getting Peter to kill the wolf, Mogrim, when he attacks his sisters, and it being the most natural thing in the world that Aslan should tell all the other warriors, as it were, to step back and say, no, let the prince win his spurs, which is in a children's book. Like, there's so many layers there that you could unpack about like that particular phrase. I just read it and thought, cool, I don't know what that means, but never mind. But then the fact that Peter then does that and then has to wipe his sword, there's so much going on in that little scene. But the core thing is that Peter is being given the opportunity, sort of initiated as a young man and given the opportunity to show nobility, but also he's not doing it to get credit, to get praise. He's doing it to save his sisters and to grow up into a kind of a noble way of being, which then he ends up also being the High King. And sort of you can't, that whole idea of being a king who serves his people, not a ruler who looks for power, which comes up again in Prince Caspian. And things like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I think all those
Yeah.
things are not escapism. They're serious ways to learn these things. But if you tell them in a realistic story, then you miss them, I think, because it's
Yeah,
not,
that's it.
it's too close to the bone, and it's not in the world of imagination where you're then taking it in.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point about it, helping kids to have courage, to be brave, which, as you say, it's missing from a lot of children's fiction. And I was just Googling to see if they're actually doing a remake of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. But they're starting off with a remake of The Magician's Nephew.
Well, it's
Which is
never been
coming
made
out
into
on
a film before, so it's the first time someone put it on screen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's not a remake, is it? No, you're right there. Yeah, and that's coming out on Thanksgiving Day, November the 26th. Okay.
Yeah. No,
So yeah,
I'll be really interested to see how Greta Gerwig handles it, because she's an interesting director, having done Barbie and Little Women and things like that. So I think she'll certainly do something interesting with it. Whether it's something that I will sort of agree with or sympathize with, I'm not sure, just because
that's
I
it.
think her perspective is probably quite a different one, but I'm sure it will be
Yeah.
in dialogue with Lewis in a intelligent way. But yeah, because she's go on, Bernie.
Yeah, I'm wondering if with these, well, first make or remake, whether there'll be how far they'll be sort of removing some of the Christian allegorical things that are in the stories, how much they'll not use them or play them down in a way. But we'll just have to wait and see. That's it. Whether they'll try to bring it in line with more modern thinking to their way of thinking.
Yeah, well, I think Gerwig will be very alert to those themes, because like you can interpret the Barbie movie as a sort of Fall from Eden type thing in terms of that awareness of death and so on. So and her film Lady Bird, she's kind of quite engaged with some of the religious stuff there. Although with Little Women, she did sort of downplay a lot of the more Christian elements of that story, I think. So yeah, I think she'll do something with it, but whether it'll I suspect it might rile up Christian readers. She's also time shifting it forwards by like 50 years or so, which might allow for the sort of later films, if they continue through the series, to sort of be set in more like the present day, something more recognizably the present day, which is an interesting shift, but I'm not sure a necessary one. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how it's handled. But yeah, I think coming back to the theme of virtue, I think that's definitely part of Lewis's intention, and you sort of see with his book The Abolition of Man, he kind of critiques the sort of tendency to see through traditional values and virtues of courage and heroism and stuff like that. He very much anticipates the kind of tendency to deconstruct, and I think there's lots of stories these days that are very much about reinventing and subverting and putting a modern new twist on traditional stories. I think was it Philip Reef who called them death works, in terms of their kind of how they are hostile to the culture that birthed them, and that's kind of quite an interesting phenomenon, because I think there is an important place for critique and for sort of seeing through hypocrisy and seeing through moral failings, but when you are so thoroughly repudiating the kind of when you're kind of cutting off the branch you're sitting on effectively. And I think there's some a problem with that. But it's also one of the reasons why Lewis is perhaps out of fashion among sort of certain strands of popular intellectual opinion. is
Oh,
that
yeah.
is that he stood against a lot of these cultural tides with his Christianity and with his kind of cultural conservatism, I guess, in terms of looking back with more of a much more positive view of the medieval age and of sort of traditional Western values.
Yeah. Yeah, because I've been, I was just thinking, yeah, I've heard quite a few preachers, different Christian preachers over the years, use things about what Aslan said or what Aslan did in the book, because they were able to link up with people, as Jeff was saying about Narnia being a part of culture, and a lot of people being familiar with the Aslan story. But then in getting ready to do street evangelism, I've been getting myself ready to be more of an apologist, and I don't know if I can really do it, because you're thinking in terms of, well, especially since the hippie revolution, we've got a very, in many ways, an anti-authoritarian society. And it seems very authoritarian to have a holy God who demands worship and obedience, but he'll accept you through the blood sacrifice of his son, which to modern minds sounds very foolish and very primitive. Yeah, so.
Which is one of the things I think is so well done, actually, in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The idea of the deep magic is I think, is a great concept. That there's this, because the way it's described is as a sort of foundational. You could almost say it's just the way things are. It's part of the fabric of the universe, and Aslan's quite short with Susan or Lucy, whoever it is, who says, can't something, can't you sort of basically dodge the deep magic and not have to have Aslan sacrifice, Edmund sacrificed back to the White Witch, that kind of thing. And then he's sort of, no, it's like, this is part of the fabric of the universe. Something has to be, the idea, you get to see how it sort of makes sense in the Narnia context that Aslan then has to die instead of Edmund, because someone has to die, because that's the deep magic. And he doesn't really justify that. He just states it, that this is just the way Narnia is. And because it's an imaginary world, he can do that. He doesn't have to explain it. This is how it is. And then you see how that works out and makes sense. It holds together coherently and logically. And but then the deeper magic is, I think, the genius, the fact that there's a magic deeper still that the White Witch has never known, that when someone willingly offers themselves, then death itself works backwards. And that's the kind of eucatastrophe that Tolkien would talk about. That's the glory of it, that there's this it goes deeper. I think that sense of deeper is something that comes up a lot in Narnia as a whole, that kind of going layers deeper,
further up and further in,
further in.
That's it. Admittedly, I shy away from apologetics, because, like you were just saying there, well, that's the way things are, the deep magic, and C.S. Lewis doesn't explain it. That my tone when I've evangelized has always been, well, sorry, mate, this is the ball game. This is the way God set it up. You can't argue with it. It's just the way it is, That's it. so you don't bother with the apologetics. You just say, well, it's the way it is. God's made this wonderful universe, given us His holy, His laws, His Son, His grace, everything else. It's all there for the taking.
Yeah. So
So we
so
see.
I so I think it's one of the controversial things about Narnia is the extent to which it is functioning as a Christian apologetic, and I think there's lots of people um, um, who don't have a faith who kind of feel a bit cheated once they realise, oh no, that's the game, is it?
Yeah, I've heard
Yeah.
exactly that. Yeah,
And I think it's important to stress that Lewis didn't devise Narnia for the purpose of communicating Christian allegory. He was emphatic. He wrote an article about sometimes was it in sometimes fairy tales say best what is to be said, but there's a couple of places where he talked about the origins of Narnia, but basically he said it's moonshine to think that I sort of go, oh right, how will I communicate the Christian truths in a way I know. I will use fairy tale. I will
yeah,
hammer out an allegory.
Yeah,
That's
that's
not what
it.
he did. He started with images, fantastical images of a fawn with boxes, of a great lion, and he found this whole story came bounding together from those, pulled together by the figure of Aslan. But then he said that once he had the story taking shape, he sort of saw the opportunity to sort of weave in these ideas organically, to sort of explore the idea of what it means to what it might mean for Christ to become incarnate in a world like Narnia, in a world of talking animals, of naiads and dryads and dwarves and giants and so on. So it's a more science fictional approach rather than an allegorical one, in terms of it's like, okay, supposing this happened, what might follow? So yeah, I think it's interesting that he took that approach. He did see it as sort of stealing past the watchful dragons of over familiarity to be able to communicate stuff, to bring stuff alive in a way that has a fresh potency. But yeah, what do you think? At what point did you were you always conscious of the Christian elements? Did you ever get that sense of tricked? He was trying to evangelize me all along, or anything like that?
No, well, I was dead in my sin, and I heard the gospel lots of times. Up, brought up in the church, so I'd heard the message lots of times, but I was just blind and deaf, so I just didn't notice it. So, assuming I did read Narnia books before I got saved, then no, it was only, I think, going back to the youth fellowship to realise more about the Christian significance of the Narnia books. Yeah.
I didn't. I actually genuinely don't think I joined the dots. I think I remember vaguely having a background sense of, oh, this is a familiar story that I know is vaguely. I knew that Aslan kind of represented Jesus and that sort of thing. But growing up in the church as well, there was sort of, that was always in the background anyway. So I think I was sort of just thinking, oh, this feels very comfortable, that this sort of fits that story, and the fact that it's how Jesus would work out in another world. That was just all I needed to know. But I wasn't reading it like that. I was reading it as a great story and getting lost in the world and thinking, oh, I want to be in Narnia. But I'm talking to some friends who, I told them I love it. It's one of my favorite books, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and they said, oh, I don't like that book, because exactly as you said, Caleb, that I found out it was all like about Jesus and stuff, or God and stuff, or Christianity, and I felt basically they felt tricked, because they bought into, I guess, the idea that it was trying to convince them of something. But of course it isn't. It just is the what Lewis is doing is trying to write a great story, which he manifestly achieved.
Yeah.
So the fact that it's there is not the point of the book. But I think I remember feeling really like almost grieving for my friends that they had lost something so precious and amazing that
Yeah.
because they just chucked it out on the basis of feeling cheated, which was never the intention of the author. And I thought, wow, that's such a tragedy. That there's this wonderful and rich imaginative place that you can go, and you've chosen to never go there. And also, maybe as a sort of side point to that, I guess it's astonishing to me how few people have read any of the other Narnia books. They sort of think that Narnia stops with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. In fact, a lot of people don't go any further than the title. They know there's a wardrobe and that's about it. And then, but to me, the best of Narnia is in the other books. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just on that, I think as much as I love The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, there does seem something a bit more freewheeling, a bit less thought through than later ones.
because it's the first one.
Yeah, and so Tolkien famously sort of thought it wouldn't do the kind of mishmash and bringing in Father Christmas and stuff, and it kind of works on the fairy tale level, but not so much as a believable secondary world fantasy, if I can sort of distinguish fairy story from fantasy in that sort of way. Obviously they sort of blend together, but it's interesting that by the end of the series, Lewis was kind of going back, and he wrote The Magician's Nephew, and he was explaining lots of the weird bits and pieces, kind of coming up with rationale for here's why there was a lamppost, here's why the wardrobe led to Narnia and stuff like that. So I do feel like some of the later ones have maybe a bit more sophistication, a bit more thing to them, but there is a just drawing on Christianity does give an archetypal mythic resonance within Western culture that, regardless of what you think of the story from a religious point of view, it's sort of tapping into these deep mythic resonance themes and images, I think. So yeah, I can understand why it puts people off, but I would encourage people not to let it dissuade them from enjoying its pleasures.
I'd be tempted to say to them, sorry, you didn't realise its historical context. It was written at a time when Britain, UK, was sort of coming back to hope and faith, that C.S. Lewis had helped revive that faith. They'd had days of prayer, thanksgiving during World War II and all that. And the Christian faith was an accepted part of the British way of thinking. It's part of the culture. So when an author is writing, then he very much draws upon his or her culture. So it's bound to be there, and you're just unfortunate that you didn't realise it was written from a more Christian cultural period of British history. That's it.
Yeah. Yes. So maybe as we sort of draw towards the end, what do you think the future is for Narnia? Do you think that it does still connect with children today? And we've got this Netflix adaptation of The Magician's Nephew coming up. I think you can see its influence in culture on things like Harry Potter, on Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials. There's been things like Lev Grossman's Magicians trilogy that has very directly sort of referenced and responded to Narnia. Is it going to continue to be part of the cultural conversation, or is it inevitable that after a certain amount of time it's going to sort of fade away a bit?
It's a hard one because, to say, it depends how much media takes up more Christian thinking and drawing upon Christian culture. like for your cousins, my three original Pommy Aussie kids, they were well, especially Richard and Holly, the two older ones, they were what I call the Disney kids. They sort of grew up on Disney, and they had that fantasy, that imagination, and they had that Christian culture. So they could relate to it. But then I think in terms of grandkids, where they're at and where Netflix and Disney are, it's hard for kids to take on those sort of stories, values, if they're not getting them from elsewhere, and whether they'd be ready to listen to investigate them, I don't know. Because I've been thinking back to when I was growing up with my sister, your mum, Caleb, that we'd sit on her bed playing with soft toys until our teens, even or beyond, making up stories, sort of moving them around, and we had a good imagination stimulated by things like Narnia and other things as well. So we were able to enter that world of kind of imagination, whereas today's grandkids will be more imagining, I don't know, all sorts of things.
Yeah,
superheroes and the Greek gods and all that. Just thinking about the sort of stuff that's there in the movies. Yeah.
What do you think, Jeff?
I think good stories never actually go away, do they? I mean, we're still, like you said, Bernie, we're still reading the Odyssey and things like that. It's a pretty old book now. It's well out of copyright. I think the language. I mean, there might come a day when English has moved on so much that someone has to kind of update the language of the book or something. But the stories just clearly captures generation after generation. So I think it's the kind of story that has just become. It'll go on forever, and in its core. But also, I think the whole Narnia Chronicles will do that, and there are so many layers to explore in there. I mean, like the Planet Narnia thing that Michael Ward discovered. That's a glorious other layer to these books that you can go back to them and then read them again as completely fresh and exciting sort of discovery experience. And I think there's not a lot of literature that could happen to so far down the line after they've been written. So I think I wonder what else there is. It's a rich source of images and story, and it's the kind of thing that children and adults can both read. So I think it's just too good that it will just fade off and disappear. It's clearly stood the test of time, and I don't see it going away anytime soon.
Perhaps I've got a duty as a grandparent to stimulate the grandson who lives close by, who we see 2-3 times a week, to sort of stimulate his imagination by getting nice soft toys, which he grabbed yesterday, and use my imagination and stimulate his imagination to get them talking to each other, making up stories, which is in some ways harder with boys to do it that way, because boys, I think they've still got an attraction to what has been called boys' own adventures, because I sort of grew up with explorers and all sorts as heroes in my Look and Learn educational magazine each week and all that, and going for a couple of years to British public school, private school, that you sort of encouraged. There's that sort of spirit of being encouraged to be an adventurer. They did it for the empire, but you can do it for yourself. You can be a Bitcoin, a crypto adventurer if you want to. A sense of adventure, enterprise, and all that. Yeah.
It's interesting because I think certainly my experience has been, and reading it with our girls, who are our two older ones, they've very much enjoyed and read it, but we have read it to them, and I think with some of this stuff and with stories, kids need to be introduced to it. They need to be given the love of reading, and also they catch the enthusiasm for particular books and for particular stories. So I think there's just that developing the taste of kids for these kind of stories is a gift that as parents or grandparents we have that opportunity to give. And I'll be interested to see whether our youngest, who is a boy who's about to turn 3, is not old enough for Narnia yet, but in a few years' time, I'll be interested to see how he responds to them compared to the girls, whether there's any difference in that. But yeah, I think there's probably with the cultural shifts, there is a lot less of that sort of boys' own adventure type thing, and sometimes for good reason, because some of the colonial stuff really did need deconstructing and challenging, but as is often the case with human beings, we often swing the pendulum too far in another direction. I think when it's all about when you lose the sense of strength, of heroism, of battle, of these things, of being able to go out and fight bravely in a virtuous cause, there is something that's lost when you don't have those kind of stories to inspire. So yeah, I think maybe one of the reasons we'll keep going back to these stories is perhaps precisely because of the loss of more modern examples of this kind of storytelling. But perhaps writers, and I'm working on some stuff myself at the moment, storytelling wise, we need to do some more stuff that's kind of in the spirit of Narnia, but updated for today's generation.
Yeah, I'm thinking I definitely need to reread the Narnia books, because I just love to after our conversation this morning, or British Evening Time, because I need my fantasy imagination stimulating, because I've found out that I've got aphantasia like Aldous Huxley, that I can't visualize things, and I haven't got visual memory, which is making it harder for writing an autobiography that's going to be sort of very factual. So I'm thinking, perhaps I should just stick to historical and political. And see if I can prove that Chesterfield did play a part in the Glorious Revolution with Revolution House and all, or not. That's another little project, because it's not there in the other history books. It's in Chesterfield's history, but not in the general history books. So, we'll see.
Lewis's brother Warney was a great appreciator of Lewis's work, but he didn't write fiction. He wrote about the French Revolution, I believe, or no, the French court. Well, he was an expert on that stuff, wasn't he? And wrote history, and so that's just goes to show you can enjoy reading these things and write other things completely differently, and that could be your gifting.
Yeah, because I read that with aphantasia, it's a lot to do with I suppose you call it the intellectual type, that just stealing facts, especially scientists and I suppose historians as well, that they haven't got the same imagination, and perhaps it's the way their brains are made, like mine, that they've been more drawn to the factual things rather than imagining things. But now I'm trying to rediscover my imagination in my senior years.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Some of the really great scientists, like Einstein, for example, he did these very imaginative thought experiments, and I think often the people who can bring together both creative and analytical forms of thinking, I think there's often something particularly powerful about that. But and Lewis is one of these people who had both a creative genius, and he was also very incredibly sharp and knowledgeable, sort of in terms of literature and philosophy. A really exceptional mind. But just to close, maybe we can just end with sharing if you've got a favourite moment from either The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe or from the Narnia books as a whole series. What for you is a sort of high point of your enjoyment of these books?
I could do that. It's probably my favorite parts are probably in the other books, not
Jeff.
in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But I'll share one of my favorite moments from The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's actually when near the end, when in the chapter called "What Happened About the Statues," when Aslan is very significantly breathing on the stone statues and they come to life. And this is my favorite little bit. I think about this a lot. There's lots to unpack in it. So he's been going around doing all of the statues, and they're all coming to life. And instead of the deadly silence, the whole place rang with the sound of happy roarings, brayings, yelpings, barkings, squealings, cooings, neighings, stampings, shouts, hurrahs, songs, and laughter. "Oh," said Susan in a different tone. "Look, is it safe?" Lucy looked and saw that Aslan had just breathed on the feet of the stone giant. "It's all right," shouted Aslan joyously. "Once the feet are put right, all the rest of him will follow." "That wasn't exactly what I meant," whispered Susan to Lucy. But it was too late to do anything about it now, even if Aslan would have listened to her. The change was already creeping up the giant's legs. Now he was moving his feet. A moment later, he lifted his club off his shoulder, rubbed his eyes, and said, "Bless me, I must have fallen asleep."
Yeah,
Love that moment.
I loved the way later in that chapter the other lion is so excited that Aslan has said "us lions,"
Us lions, yeah.
I think Lewis is brilliant in terms of characterizations.
Yeah.
Lots of great side characters, but ones like Reaper Sheep and Puddle Glum. There's just so many rich and memorable characters.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really grateful for these books. I think you can. There's definitely places where you can nitpick or shortcomings or cultural or stuff that you can legitimately raise flags about. But on the whole, I think they're just wonderful, powerful stories. Well, we better wrap it up. It's almost an hour, and I'm keen to watch The Traitors this evening. So
Okay.
So
Great. Thanks for
my favourite moment for another time.
From high culture to low culture. Bernie, just quickly, do you want to? Do you have a favourite moment?
Well, I'll try and say it very short. It's when Aslan brings the world into being through his singing.
Oh,
Because I believe music and maths are both sort of divine gifts to us, the way they're constructed. Okay, that's all I'll say. I'll let you get off to your thing. I don't know if I want to watch another Liverpool loss.
An interesting
Lost
parallel with Tolkien's origin story in the Silmarillion as well. The sort of music. Yes, many wonderful themes. Great. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you so much for taking part. And I don't know if we've had many viewers, but I've certainly had fun.
Thank you for organising. That was really good. It's a pleasure to get to talk about this stuff.
Yeah, it's really good. Good to meet you, Jeff.
God bless you. Night.
Yeah.
Take care. See you soon.
Okay,
Bye.
bless you both.